doesn't make a lot of sense for him to do that, but it's one thing that they both remembered.
Right, exactly.
And so, yeah. Now, there are those who investigated at the time that felt like the Smurls were being less than honest. But there are people that are saying that the Smurls are hoaxing, but the Smurls didn't make any money off of this. This was never, even though they contacted the police and a book publisher, they never made any money off of it. So it's certainly bad planning if that's what they were going for. And just because people don't remember things the same way
doesn't mean it can happen.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when you're dealing with haunting, because the thing about haunting is it's so personal. And I may remember one thing about it, you may remember something else that may appear to be contradictory, but really it's not, because how much of a haunting is a personal situation? Maybe you see the ghost in all its bloody glory, right? It's got a bleeding head wound and you see that. Maybe I don't. Maybe I just see the aftermath. So the ghost I see is much more greenish and looks like it had just crawled out of a fresh grave. And I don't see the blood.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with an entity that is mostly experienced psychically as opposed to seen physically, if you want my honest opinion. And as near as I could tell, looking into the Smurl family, they were a very typical family of the late 60s, early 70s. They weren't
trying to get attention.
Yeah, they didn't try. It seemed to be attention getters. They didn't seem to be trying to make a name for themselves. So
there was no reason for them to be making stuff up. But
right now, since then, other scientists have said that they felt like the Smurls were guilty of nothing more than hysteria. That together they convinced each other they saw these things and heard these things. So yeah, there are those who say, well, they got the book deal, so that's why they were hoaxing this, is they wanted a book deal. But man, in that day and age, even a book deal like the Amityville, it didn't make them. And Amityville was a very successful movie, and it later became a successful movie franchise. But it didn't do anything to enrich the people that experienced it, the DeFeos.
right.
You know, so it's just a really odd thing. And so my opinion is that if you make me buckle down, I'm going to say that I buy into the Smurl haunting,
Mm-hmm.
even though since they have moved out, there have been no reports of a haunting there. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, it's like moving into an apartment building. Sometimes you'll move into an apartment building and just, you won't connect with anybody, so you might as well be living there by yourself. Like, you know, you might see people, but they're not, you know, they're not in any way close to you. You couldn't describe them, they couldn't describe you.
Right.
And sometimes you'll move into a building and suddenly you're the center of attention and people are coming over to hang out and drink wine at your place. And it's just you've connected better into that apartment than, the other guy. And that's where we're at with the Smurls, is I honestly think that they tagged into something there that was happening. But that doesn't mean that was the only thing happening.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I tend to go with this one. And like I said, and to me, it has nothing to do with the Warrens. I look at the Warrens as very much a force on their own. What they do doesn't make a case or break it for me. So I'm going to go with the Smurls being very much legit. Yeah. Your thoughts, Krysta Lins?
Here's my thing with this whole house thing.
Okay.
I do believe it. It's but it's a very interesting topic that you would bring up in somebody and it's just be like, that is easy to say you didn't do that because they didn't do it. It's very easy to throw off and be like, hey, that didn't actually happen. And I don't feel like that should be. Because maybe one day, if something like that happened to you, you wouldn't be very happy about it. You'd be more like, well, shoot. That's how they felt.
Right.
And so I feel like it might be a very unreasonable or not very, how should I put this? Real to some people, because they haven't seen something like that, or they haven't experienced something like that. But as somebody who is willing to give everyone or everything a chance at least once, that's something I'm willing to do.
What about you, babe?
I've always, if somebody says there's a haunting, I'm going to believe it until it just gets too ridiculous that I just can't anymore.
Until something.
So, I absolutely, if they say it happened, especially if you haven't put it out there and made a bunch of money off of it and used it to, just be your 15 minutes of fame kind of thing. If it's something that you've lived with and continued on with, no matter even if it's put you in more of a bad situation than a good situation, then absolutely I'm gonna take you at your word.
And I'm with you. I like that. I like that very much.
Oh! Are we finished with this yet, or do I get to do my question?
You can do your question.
I didn't know if we were doing a second story, are we?
No.
No, this is it. Yeah. Okay. Well. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my new thing. Called
Christmas question of the day.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd get that.
Yes.
Yay!
So Krysta's decided she's going to do another little Krysta thing just to add to the Family Flat podcast. And Krysta, what do you have for us?
Alright, so today's question I'm going to ask you both, which is not a challenge.
Oh, that's good, because we never do good at your challenges.
Yep. Mystery of how animals appeared on Earth solved by science. So what I'm saying is, how do you think animals appeared on Earth? Dad, you want to go first?
Sure. Because I thought we'd answered this question with science and sciencey stuff. like evolution was.
See, this is what I'm talking about. This is the question of the day. This was what I was talking to you about earlier. Okay, let's put out the rules for this biz, shall we?
Yes.
Yeah, there's rules?
Yeah.
Yes, there's rules for this. Krysta decided on, like, this is like a whole thing.
This is a whole thing. That's what I'm talking about.
So, let me just see if I've got it right. You can correct me if I'm wrong, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, as I understand Krysta's question of the day, Krysta, our 12-year-old, and our very, very curious and brilliant young daughter that she is, Krysta's a curious 12-year-old. And Krysta has things that she wonders, and while we very much appreciate our school system, they don't always
tell you everything.
They don't always run concordantly with what children's brains kind of question. So our Krysta has decided that once a week on the Family Plot podcast, she's going to ask a question that's been rattling around in her pretty little head that she has already researched on her own. She wants us to answer it how we would as mom and dad, to the best of our ability, just on the spot. And then she's going to tell us
the actual answer,
what she has found in her research to answer that question, and maybe we'll learn something from her just like she learned something from us.
Okay.
Yeah, so which one wants to go first?
I think Daddy was going to go first.
Yeah, I thought science had covered that, what with fossils and whatnot, so.
Good job, Mom. You did the whole thing.
I thought I had paid attention when we had discussed it. So Dad says that just normal science has told us that animals have evolved starting from single-celled organisms and evolved up through millions of years to dinosaurs, then dinosaurs evolved, and just the evolution process. I, on the other hand, am not as quite so sciencey, and I actually believe in the religious that God created Earth and the animals and all of that. But according to science, I believe that he's on it. But what did you find?
All right. So today's research is found on independent.co.uk.
Okay.
Today's research is by Ian Johnson. Thank you.
Okay.
As this says, it is a story of spanning hundreds of millions of years of entire mountain ranges ground to dust by glaciers that was once covered the planet, and dramatic climate change that ushered a new biological age. Life on Earth was dominated by simple bacteria around up until about 650 million years ago, when more complex forms of life suddenly took over. The reasons why this happened were something of a mystery. However, scientists in Australia and Germany now claim to have identified the pivotal moment that set life on Earth on course to evolve to a vast array of animal life, from insects to dinosaurs and humans. What were you going to say? You're shaking your hand.
I was just going to say, it sounds to me like everything you're saying is pretty much what Dad just said.
This revolution of the ecosystems began to happen about 700 million years ago, when the planet view became what is known as snowball Earth. As ice covered virtually its entire surface, giant glaciers around huge mountains to powder, releasing life-giving nutrients such as philosophy